In a study of 608 people who'd had a stroke, Thomas Back of the University of Edinburgh in the UK found that of the bilinguals among them, 40% recovered full function compared with only 20% of monolinguals. Yet another good reason to learn Greek. So here's our first text for lesson 6. It says, Egoemi hapoimen hakalos. This comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 11. And again, you can find this on my blog, logosword.wordpress.com. So I printed it out landscape again so that there's more room to spread it out. And I have my paper folded and written on, so you might want to do yours before I show what I have here. The first is the letter-by-letter translation, Egoemi hapoimen hakalos. Now, the word-by-word translation, I am the shepherd, the good. A few points to notice. The word for "the" is repeated. This happens in Greek when the adjective, the describing word, follows the noun, the word which it describes. In Greek, sometimes the adjective comes before the noun and sometimes after, but when it comes after the noun and the word "the" is there, it must be repeated again before the adjective. So we have two new words, poimen and kalos. Poimen means shepherd. We have nothing on that word, but interestingly, in Latin, it's pastor. So we use the word pastor in our churches today. Pastor is simply Latin for shepherd. The other new word is kalos, which means good, as in calligraphy, which is good or beautiful writing. So now our proper translation in English, I am the good shepherd. Okay. When you think about it, it's a bit unfortunate that we have to translate word for word into Pacific Islands where people never see a sheep. And in New Zealand, where I live, we herd sheep by scaring them with dogs, which is a totally different thing to what Jesus is talking about. Every translation makes changes. The King James Bible famously said, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing?" when the bird in question was probably not a sparrow, and the coin was certainly not a farthing. Of course, changing things can create difficulties, especially when you're talking about something as common in the Bible as sheep. But I really question whether Jesus would have spoken about sheep if he had come to a Pacific island or to a modern urban Western situation. Perhaps our translations are a little bit stuck on the letter to the neglect of the spirit. Well, over to you. Can you think of an analogy which we might use in modern Western culture that would capture Jesus' meaning? Let me know if you think of a good one. Here's our next passage for lesson 6. It comes from John chapter 15 verse 1, and it's the last of the Egoemi statements that Jesus made in John's Gospel that we're going to look at. Chapter 15 verse 1, it says, Egoemi he ampalos he alethine. And again, if you have your paper prepared, printed landscape, I'm about to show what I have written on the first part. Egoemi he ampalos he alethine. And we notice how the he is repeated, the word is repeated again. So now the word-by-word translation. I am the vine, the true. So ampalos is a new word. It means vine or grapevine. And then we have alethine, which means true. We already had the word aletheia, and now we have alethine. The eia ending, as in aletheia, characterizes nouns or names like Laodicea, Philadelphia. In Greek they have the 3 letters, E-I-A. And the other ending we have here is the I-N-E, which often means made of, as we have in English, wooden means made of wood. So the I-N part indicates made of, not always, but in general it indicates made of, and here it's just indicating a characteristic. So aletheia was describing the thing, it's a noun, and alethine is describing the quality, it's an adjective, and it has the in ending along with the a, which is just part of the Greek grammar, which we have there. So our proper translation, I am the true vine. And as we see this, we realize how Jesus could have added the word true to several of his previous statements. True light, true bread, true life. Okay, and then we have our final showing you the answer. We have our final passage for lesson 6, which this one comes from Revelation chapter 1 verse 8. Ego eimi to alpha kai to omega. Revelation chapter 1 verse 8, and our letter by letter translation. Ego eimi to alpha kai to omega. Then word by word translation. I am the Alpha and the Omega. So these are new words, Alpha, which of course we get alphabet from. So Alpha is the name of the first letter in the Greek alphabet, and Beta is the second. So that's why we talk about alphabet. It's just like saying they're AB, they're alphabet. And Omega is the last letter of the alphabet. So here Jesus is saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Now, we were talking about expressing it in terms of our modern culture. So I suppose the equivalent would be, I am the A and the Z, or I am the A to Z. But definitely here I admit, even though I favor cultural changes, definitely here this seems to rather trivialize it. So again, I put it to you, could you think of anything else we could say for the benefit of readers who may not know anything about the Greek alphabet? I suppose we could say the beginning and the end. What have I written there? Nothing, so it's blank for you to write whatever you think. Now I'm going to introduce you to what is easily the most valuable book in the world. Here it is. This is the Greek New Testament, 5th revised edition with dictionary. It's state-of-the-art as far as the text of the New Testament goes. You know, there are thousands of manuscripts of the Greek New Testament, ancient manuscripts, some of them quite difficult to read, faded and blotted and everything. But we're certainly well off compared to other ancient books. However, there are a fair number of disagreements between the manuscripts, so it's a big job to try to work out what John, Matthew, Paul and the rest originally said. This little book represents thousands and thousands of hours of work by top scholars to try to determine this. So I'll give you an example from the verse we just looked at, which was Revelation chapter 1 verse 8. Here it says, Ego eimi, to alpha, kai to omega, the verse we just looked at. And we see a little number 3 here, which leads us down to number 3 here. And this is verse 8, and it gives an A. And then it gives a list of all the different manuscripts and church fathers. And then after this double line here, it gives a little extra bit that some manuscripts add, these ones. And these words say the beginning and the end. But the A rating means that it's almost certain that those words are not in the original, not actually written by John himself, but added by a later scribe. And in fact, in brackets here they say C 21:6. So they're suggesting that these words were copied here by some scribe from chapter 21 verse 6. Maybe he wanted to explain it just as we were saying, Alpha and Omega meaning beginning and end. That's a possibility. And I also mentioned the dictionary that this book contains with dictionary. And this dictionary is very useful, having it bound here with the book, because the dictionary comes in the back after the text, maps, and then here is the dictionary. It's done by a man called Barclay Newman, who is himself a very good translator. He was responsible for the CEV translation. And this dictionary is very helpful because it's concise, and he always gives first the most common meaning in the New Testament. So that makes it quite a good guide. And we're going to look up the word kai that we had, just to see what he says. Kai, conjunction, that's its grammatical function. And he gives the meanings and, also, but, even. And that is namely, and then he gives some examples. Sometimes it means both and, or not only but also. Frequently used merely to mark the beginning of a sentence. So this is what I was saying, that and is really just the first approximation, and perhaps the best way to say which is the first approximation or the best guess is the most common way that it's used, the most common meaning that it takes in the New Testament. And Barclay Newman here shows us that and is the most common meaning that it takes. So this dictionary is very useful as a first port of call, and often it's all you need, and it's very handy having it bound in the back of your New Testament. So this very valuable book, as I said, there is no doubt in my mind that this is the most valuable book in the world. It's state-of-the-art New Testament book. The Greek text of the New Testament determined as accurately as possible, more accurately than ever before, with this excellent dictionary by Barclay Newman. And this book you can obtain from the UBS, the United Bible Societies, and it's worth every penny that you spend on it. I advise everyone to get their own copy. The interesting thing to me is that we have here the New Testament text better established than the text of Shakespeare's plays, and we understand it better. Some of the colourful vernacular that Shakespeare used for the benefit of those in the cheap seats is completely lost on us today, and different manuscript copies of his works have different wordings in a number of places. So they have the same job with Shakespeare, as with the Greek New Testament, as with all old and ancient books, to establish, first of all, exactly what did the original author write, and secondly, what exactly did he mean. So we are very well off with the New Testament, and like I said, thousands of hours of work, probably millions of hours of work, have gone into this little book here, which is a state of the art. But we still don't have it perfectly, we have to admit. We can't be 100% sure that John himself didn't actually write those extra words at Revelation 1:8, the beginning and the end. He may have. We can be 99% sure perhaps that he didn't, but he may have. And in terms of meaning, there are parts of the New Testament where we can't be 100% sure of the exact meaning and connotations of the words and phrases. For example, something I was just reading the other day in John chapter 11 verse 37, some of the Jews who had come to mourn Lazarus say, Jesus opened the eyes of the blind. Couldn't he have prevented Lazarus from dying? So just exactly how accusatory those words are, we can only guess the exact tone in which they said them. We can make a pretty good guess, but we can't be 100% sure. Still, we have quite a high level of certainty, more so than with Shakespeare's works, which of course were written much more recently. And how much more valuable are these words than even those of Shakespeare?